You're listening to the Erica M. McAfee podcast, sharing stories of grief and loss due to miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, and women's infertility and trying to conceive journey. Hey girl, this is Erica M. McAfee, and I'm coming to you just to share my story. So welcome. You are the first to listen to the Erica M. McAfee podcast, where I want to dig a little deeper. I want to share the stories of those women who are willing to share their stories of miscarriage, infant loss, or infertility, and how they have overcome that grief and moved on to triumph. So join me weekly as I interview women as well as men, as well as therapists and counselors and other type of coaches on this journey of grief, reconciliation, and just becoming one through your loss or your miscarriage. As I mentioned before, this is Erica. I am a pastor's wife. I'm a mom to Super Mighty Maxwell, who is a bodacious, almost 3-year-old now. He'll be 3-year-old next month in August. Toddler, and he has cerebral palsy, spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy. So he has some special needs, and he definitely is he is disabled. So I would be, I'm excited to share with you all that journey, but also have a journey of loss on how we got to Maxwell. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my story and how I have overcome grief in and out through these last 5 years on my journey just to have children. So I'll take you back to 2012. My husband and I were planning a wedding. We were both in different states. And I've moved closer to him in North Carolina. And we become pregnant. Of course, you all know how that happens. We were engaged at the time. We had a wedding in a few months. So it was kind of one of those things like, we're pregnant. Do we share? Do we wait until after 12 weeks and share after the wedding's over with? And push come to shove, make a long story short, those who know me know what happened at my wedding. It became out there that we were expecting at our wedding, so we ended up telling everybody the next day that we were expecting, and that our son, we didn't know at that time, was due in November. So I went through the pregnancy, didn't have really major issues. At that time, I was working shift work, so very typical to a nurse's schedule where you work 12 hours a day, you rotate shifts. And I just, always felt him Brandon Jr. Was his name, moving at night, and I didn't think anything of it. So push come to shove, I started to develop a condition called preeclampsia. For those of you all who know anything about pregnancy, anytime that you have any type of protein in your urine, and that's typically what they monitor throughout your pregnancy, and your blood pressure starts to elevate, it shows signs of preeclampsia where your body could actually shut down. And the only way to cure this is to have the baby. So I was induced for labor. I went through about 16 or 17 hours of labor. I got fully dilated, and I was induced with Pitocin, and got fully dilated, push for about 3 hours, could not get him to come down past my hips. My hips were just too narrow. He could not come down through that area. So I went in for a C-section. And as I talk about it, I can picture myself back into that day, because at that time, it was majorly an out of body experience, because you're going through all these pains and pushing and prodding from all the different nurses and the doctors that are coming in, and then you're wheeled into a C-section room. And, of course, they put that curtain up at your waist level, and then they bring your husband in, and he's just sitting there, and you're listening to the doctor as they're telling you what they're doing on the other side of the curtain. And they cut me open, and I actually could feel not necessarily the pain, but I could feel them pulling and tugging at me. So then they pull the baby out, and, the doctor says, oh, welcome to the world, Brandon Jr., and he's not crying. So then I looked over to my husband and I'm like, Brandon, why isn't he crying? And then behind us, there was a nursing team, and I couldn't really see, but I could hear them out of my left corner that they were they brought the baby over there, and they were trying to resuscitate the baby. They were working really hard, and then I heard a doctor say, basically curse, like, this baby's not breathing. So, my husband just kind of tried to reassure me, but in the back of my mind, I knew deep down that something wasn't right. Typically, I've seen enough births at that time where when you have a C-section, the baby comes out. It may take them a few minutes, but they're going to cry. Babies cry. That's what they do when they come out. That's one thing that they're breathing, that their lungs are working, that there's nothing clogged up. He didn't come out with the cord wrapped around his neck or anything of that nature, but he came out and he didn't cry. So little did I know, they rolled me, they finished me up, they took the baby out of the room. At that time, in hindsight, they told me they were continuing to work on him. They tried to give him a bunch of different types of resuscitation meds to develop his lungs, and they did it for about almost 50 minutes. So my son died as soon as he was born into this world, and in the recovery room, the nurse got the phone call, and I could see her face when she got the phone call that he didn't make it. You could tell in her face and in the tone of her voice. So as I asked her, where's my baby? Could I see him? Could you bring him to me? And she said that they were going to bring him to me. They needed to come talk to me face to face. So the doctor came in along with the other two nurses and told me that Brandon Jr. didn't make it. He lived to be 39 minutes, and they were not sure why his lungs would not oxygenate. So as you can imagine, you can hear me choking up in my voice that, it was painful. It was an out-of-body experience, to say the least, where I didn't know what to do but scream. I screamed, and I vividly remember as soon as I started screaming, my mother started screaming, and my stepfather had to take her out of the recovery room, because we were just kind of like in the waiting area before they send you back into your actual room. And at that time, I do remember my grandparents being in there, and then my husband came in there, and I just said, I just want to hold my baby. So they, cleaned him up, and they finally brought him to me, and he was perfect. He looked just like me. So my husband and I had some time. They let us stay in the recovery room for a couple other hours before they actually moved us to our room. And I was in shock. I didn't know why that happened. Why did, I go through 39 weeks and 5 days of pregnancy in order to go through, labor and pushing and just a bunch of type of pain for God to not bless me with a child. So I was heartbroken. I was devastated. I was hurt. I was mad. I was angry. I was frustrated. Every emotion that you can ever feel when it comes to losing a child, that's what I felt. And I felt like I had been let down. I felt like God had let me down, and that I had put all my faith and trust into him. And, I was not promised a child in the end. fast forward, maybe 9 or 10 months later, my husband and I started going to grief counseling, and we started going to counseling together and talking to people individually, and just try to make sense of it, try to understand, try not to be mad at God, because of course, you're like, God, why was this a part of your will? This was our firstborn child. We went through all of this preparation for him. We had baby showers. We set up a crib. We had all of these things just sitting at home waiting, and we came home empty-handed. We didn't come home with the baby. So we came to some understanding for, that we understood that, everything has a purpose. God's purpose is greater than ours, and that we had to truly put our faith in him, but truly put our faith in one another, and be strong, and find strength in one another, and be willing to talk about it and go through the emotions of grief, go through, the pain, the hurt, the anger, be able to be open about how we felt about losing our son, and being able to celebrate him. So, those dates, those monumental dates that we have, November 29th 2012 will forever be etched in my mind, because that was the day that I gave birth, but it also was the day that my son earned his wings. And with all of the things that are going on in this world, of course you think of, you try to make light of it and think of it in different ways, and think, okay, well maybe he was better off to be in God's hands. Maybe the first breath that he took was good, that it was in heaven. But at the end of the day, it was just me trying to protect myself from what actually happened, versus sitting with it in my heart and really understanding that the purpose that I was living was bigger than me. The fact that Brandon Jr. passed away was bigger than me, that I would never ever be able to comprehend exactly why God took him from me. What I knew and I needed to comprehend was that it happened, and that I needed to mend my broken heart, that I needed to find a way to trust God through the journey of having kids, and continue to work on myself, whether it's, journaling more, praying more, just trying to figure out who Erica is, because she's not the same person as she was before she had a child, and then come to terms that I am a mother. I am a mother despite that I don't have a child in my arms. One thing that used to hurt me often, especially in the coming months, in the coming years after I had BJ, is that, on Mother's Day, I used to get so upset that no one would say Happy Mother's Day to me. Like I didn't, I don't have a child in my arms, but I, don't minimize the fact that I didn't carry, a child for 9, almost 10 months. Granted, he's not here with me, but I'm still a mother. I went through that process, so I had to learn how to come to grips with that and overcome, little things that would trigger my grief and make me hurt, and, understand that people aren't out there to say mean things, or, try to belittle how you feel about certain things. They just don't know your triggers, or they don't know, they just don't know any better. They're just trying to be helpful. So fast forward, about 10 months later, like I said, my husband and I were starting to go through grief counseling. We got to a place where we were ready to start trying again. And of course, during this process of trying again, it was more or less, now we've lost a child, our yearning for a child was increased even more, because we know how precious life is. We know how much of a blessing it is for God to bless you with a child. And we wanted God to bless our marriage, as well as bless us with the opportunity to parent a child. So we tried, we got pregnant again. This time it was a little girl. Her name was Brielle. And this pregnancy was different, very much so different than the first pregnancy. I had a lot of morning sickness, and I had was just different, just a different pregnancy, as most pregnancies are different. So as we go into this pregnancy, what I didn't realize is that I started to, my cervix, and this may be a little personal, but my cervix started to open slightly. I was on a work trip. I was about 18 weeks pregnant, and I started to bleed, and I'm like, where am I bleeding? So I went to the hospital where I was on this work trip, and they examined me. They said everything's fine. You may just be having some second trimester hemorrhaging. Make sure that you go see your doctor when you get back in town. So I had a doctor's appointment that following day anyway, so I drove back to where I was, and then I woke up that next morning, and it was a constant stream of blood and water, like my water had broke. So I freaked out. As you can imagine, I knew what was happening. I was having a miscarriage. So we went to the ER. Of course, they did all of the, in triage, they did all of the preliminaries. They put the baby on the monitor. They examined me, and they said, there's pretty much nothing they can do. They could see the sac and, the baby coming out. So basically, I had to go through labor again. I had to go through back labor. I literally had to labor to get the baby out. So I went through probably 8 hours of labor. I ended up getting an epidural just so I could, push my baby out. And of course, at that time she was almost 19 weeks along. She was too small for them to do anything. So, the doctors came in, they rest assured me, that I had to go through labor. There's no other way that they could get the baby out, and that she was not going to live more than a few moments outside of my womb. So I went through all of that. My village is strong. They knew that what we had went through the first time. So they, came down in full numbers just to support my husband and I as we were going through something similarly that we had just went through probably 9 or 10 months prior. And just surrounded us with love and affection as we birthed our baby girl, Brielle. And in this case, we donated her body to science and let the hospital have her body. Compared to our son, who was a full-term baby, we actually buried him in a cemetery where we were living. So both of those are my stories of loss, the loss of my son and then the loss of my daughter. And then somehow, in some way, my husband and I, started going to a different grief counselor, and then we just kept talking about just our yearning to be a parent. Granted, we loved one another. We loved what we had with one another, but having, two losses hit you back to back, really examines, you individually, on what you want and what your goals are in life. And then as collectively, as a unit, as a family, we knew that we wanted God to bless us with a child. So we just continued to pray. We continued to fast. We continued to just, intercede, ask people to intercede on our behalves, so that God will one day bless us with the desires of our heart, that we could have a child that we could hold in our arms and that we could take home from the hospital. And we wouldn't go to the hospital anymore without coming home with the baby. So about another, year and a half later, we had our son Maxwell. Maxwell was born early. A lot of complications through his pregnancy. I won't go into all those details, but he was born early. He was born at 32 weeks. And he was born not breathing, so a very similar scary scenario. They were able to resuscitate Maxwell, and that's the reason why Maxwell has a physical disability. He has cerebral palsy. It's because he was born without oxygen. which caused him to have permanent brain damage to his cerebral cortex and his basal ganglia, and a ton of other issues that comes with having any type of brain injury. You have a whole bunch of gamut of type of motor skill, developmental skill type of issues that he will have for the rest of his life. So I say all of that to say is that, Maxwell had his challenges, and he still has challenges, but, his first year and a half of life was challenging for the both of us. We ended up having to relocate to be closer to our family. We really had to re-examine how we wanted our life to be lived, even though, God granted us the desires of our heart, but, the child that God had for us wasn't packaged in the way that we thought it was going to be. We didn't have any clue about how to raise or what to do with a child with a disability, but I think that in hindsight, looking back, God was preparing our hearts. He really was preparing us. He really opened us up to, just being thankful, just being grateful, just being humble to what we were asking him for. Maybe, sometimes I always joke and say maybe we weren't specific enough because I never, my husband and I've never experienced raising a normal child. I've only experience of raising a child has been with a child that has a disability. And I'm saying, no, we were specific enough. We asked God to grant us the desires of our heart with the child, and Maxwell is the happiest child. He's the happiest baby. He lights up the room with his smile. And I mean, that's more than what we could have asked for. We could have ever dreamt or imagined when we made that petition to God. So I say all of that to say is that everybody has a story, whether your story is like mine, where you've experienced multiple losses, where you've gone through grief, where you've gone through some type of triumph. We all have stories, and we all should share our stories, whether if they hurt us or they help us. They're going to help someone in the long run. Your story may not be like my story. My story is not like the person next door, but we all have a story, and we all should be able to share our stories willingly with the thought that it's going to bless someone and give someone encouragement as they continue on this journey to overcome grief, this journey to triumph, and this journey to continue to do all that we can to excel as believers in the kingdom of Christ. So that's my story. What's your story? What do you have to share? What is your purpose in life? What do you feel God has called you to do? Are you supposed to be a mother? Are you supposed to be a wife? What can I do to help you? What can I do to pray for you on your journey? Please email me or visit my website at ericamcafee.com and let's connect. I'm excited to be on this journey with you all. I'm excited to be open to sharing your stories with everyone, and that we all learn and grow from it collectively and together. Once again, this is Erica M. McAfee. Visit my blog at ericamcafee.com, and I will talk to you all soon.